What are you going to be up to in Ellen?
I'd probably just go back to the high school and just see some people, and they asked me to go back and say hi to everybody and speak to them. So I'm for sure going to do it. It just depends.
Did you ever get a chance to go inside the football stadium before they shut it down?
No, I didn't. I was in Los Angeles, and I read all about that situation. That's crazy.
Guys ready to start?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm rolling.
Oh my gosh, what compelled you to play a character like that?
What compelled me to play the character?
To say, oh my gosh, he's so despicable. I think I'll take the challenge.
Yeah. I think if we look at film history and cinema in general, people, as an actor, if you look at a situation, you say, oh, that guy's a villain. So the guy who plays Darth Vader, or the guy who played Hannibal Lecter with Anthony Hopkins, they look at those situations and they say, oh, that's a bad guy. You really can't approach a situation from a standpoint of judging your character. So I didn't look at it as despicable. I tried not to. Of course, the first read, you're a little shocked. And I remember reading the novel and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to do this. How am I going to do this? And I was looking in the mirror and I had a shaved head and I was just like a Marine. And I was thinking, like, how is James, what is James, all right, let's go. But I think that there's things that people look at as despicable, that I think that's an interesting look on society and the way the human mind and conditions can get when you're put in severe isolation. They used to do these things at universities, like at Harvard, where they had the correctional officers and the inmates switch roles, and soon enough the patients would start abusing the doctors, and they just completely role reversed. We didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have these things back in 1950s in Sevierville, Tennessee. So he couldn't get on, like Lester Ballard probably couldn't get on the internet and be like, hey, I like caves. I like to go fishing in the river. And I don't look that good, and I have a crazy beard and screwed up teeth, and my family doesn't love me, and everybody hates me, and I live in a cabin. There might be somebody out there who's like, hey, that's the guy that I want to chill with. That's the guy I want to spend time with. He didn't really have that, So I think that's the stuff that I thought about, right? Mm-hmm. Now I understand that it is, it's a very, I know it is dark, but.
Well, there are moments that are very tender, like when he's talking to his stuffed animals.
That's not in the novel. That's a crazy thing. That's one thing that kind of happened to me in my preparation. When I was alone for a long time when I prepared for this, and I found myself talking to myself all the time. You drive down Skid Row in Los Angeles and you see guys who have gone through a lot of mental disorders or things, and they're talking to themselves, and I found myself talking to myself a lot. And so I started talking to my animals. That kind of kept what the preparation kind of just lended itself to involving itself in the movie.
So how much did you change from the source material, from the book?
There were certain scenes that didn't make the final cut of the movie. There are certain scenes. It is a very, very straight adaptation. A lot of people have talked to James and myself, thinking it's almost too straight adaptation. Because you can take different liberties, but I think that when you work with a novel and your source material is Cormac McCarthy, you can trust that. He has a track record from No Country for Old Men, All the Pretty Horses even. It's very different than Child of God, The Road, hopefully someday Blood Meridian we can do. But I think there's a lot of trust that goes involved into Cormac's work, and also it's kind of like collaborating with an author. It's not far removed. You get to, it'd be like me getting to do a movie with Kobe Bryant or something. Like I read Kobe's book and then I get to collaborate on some level. I could read Kobe's words and say, okay, what am I going to do there? I know I'm in Dallas, and I should say Dirk Nowitzki, but yeah, it is. We didn't deviate too much at all. There's just certain things that I did that kind of carried over,
Well, Scott, I'm being stereotypical when I say this, but a lot of times when the book precedes the film, the common remark that I hear is, oh, the book was way better than the film. So since you've had the benefit of being able to do both, or being exposed to both, does watching the film first help people enjoy the book more, or vice versa? Does reading the book first help people enjoy the movie more?
Yeah, I think if the one element I can say is that if you read the book, the way Lester Ballard is in the book is different than the way Lester is in the movie. And that was a conscious decision on my part, because I don't think that anybody, he's very dark in the book. It's very stark and grim and sparse in terms of the narrative. It's just, so there's a key element that I think that you get in the movie, not in the book, is the sense of, hopefully, you might root for the guy a little bit in the movie. You might, I wanted to bring life to him. I wanted him to be relatable. He's very far removed in the novel, where it's kind of like you're following this character through this town and through this crime drama, if you will. And in the movie, you get to know the guy on an emotional level. You say, you can recognize certain traits that maybe all of our friends have had in certain moments in conversations at like a coffee shop, or I don't know. I think that's the difference, is that the way Lester is in the book versus the way he appears on screen.
With the benefit of hindsight, of production and everything else, what aspects of your pre-production training regimen could you have taken it easy on?
The one thing nothing really. I look at the movie and I say, wow, I felt like I could have even lost more weight. You know what I mean? Because the hardest thing I had to do was lose the muscle I put on. It wasn't the weight at a point. It was like, how do you get rid of muscle? I think the one thing I would have done is I would have trained a little bit different. I would have ran more. I would have, because in the script it says Lester walks here, or in the novel, Lester walks to town. When we got to filming, James would keep saying, okay, you can run. Lester runs to town. Lester runs through the woods. Lester doesn't walk up the mountain. Lester climbs this cliff at a rapid rate. He carries the body to town. He carries the body out of the truck or something, and Lester walks down the street carrying a body. So it was just, I was physically drained, you know. I'd gone on that diet and I'd lost all that weight, and I probably would have just worked out a little more and done something to prepare physically. There was this actress who was in it for one scene, and she's really good at yoga, and she would come to my room every night and just stretch me out because I couldn't move at the end of filming.
So the body that you're carrying around, was that really an actress?
That's a great actress, Nina, and she's phenomenal, and that's a real girl. And that was one thing that we watched, and we were saying, she really looks dead. She did a great job. Nina Jetty, she's amazing. She's a graduate from NYU. She just graduated. She just directed her first movie, which is an adaptation of the Palo Alto stories. That was a Kickstarter. She's good. She did good.
Scott, how important was watching dailies to keep you informed of your own performance?
I didn't watch dailies. I'd already shot the movie 3 times on my own. So I don't know if I haven't really talked about that, but like I before I went and isolated myself, I did so much script work that I knew what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? I didn't need to at that point. I'd already been so familiar with the script and the novel and then the preparation. I was just ready for anything. That's why stuff that isn't in the book ended up in the movies, because James gave me the freedom to be creative and explore moments that we could leave out, but because we were there and the moment lended itself to exploration of the scene and of the character, we did it. And some of that stuff made the movie. Like the shooting of the tag, my friends, as we called them, that was all improv, if that's the right word. James just came over to me, like during a scene, goes, "We have a little time before lunch. How do you feel about killing your friends?" was like, really? It's like, okay. So we just set up one shot, and that was all just different cameras just rolling. We just did that scene. But that's not in the novel.
How did you develop the voice mannerisms and the walk?
Okay, in the book he says there's a lot of stuff referring to him in the novel as an animal or a creature. So that he's this monstrous, lioness, spider-looking creature that lived in the woods that haunted the hills of East Tennessee. So I imagined that, and one of my favorite things is Richard III by Shakespeare. And I think Shakespeare really did it in this. It's funny because Cormac does it, Shakespeare does it. I think these writers do it, and I don't think Cormac was thinking about this. I mean, he might be, who knows? Is that in Richard III, the deformity of his spine is kind of a metaphor for what's going on inside of his soul and spirit. He's going to kill his whole family at no cost to become king. Well, as Lester gets more trapped in this obsession to get more bodies and get that feeling of love again, I think it kind of happens to his body. He becomes more just decrepit, and that's something that I did play with a lot. For the voice, there was two people that I patterned my voice after. It's the same authentic East Tennessee backwoods hilly accent, and it's very drastic. We're sitting at the table. I talked to all these people with a Tennessee accent. I'm like, that just doesn't sound like what it was. And then the guy who was showing me around the town for the first part of my preparation, he was like, no, that isn't actually. I know this one guy, Lyndall. So we drove an hour up into the hills, and this old man who carves things out of wood with a pocket knife. It's the coolest stuff I'd ever seen. I had one. I lost it, but he had this old accent, and then there was one guy named Jasper. Like, this one guy had the accent at my age that only people in their 70s and 80s still had. And I hung out with that guy every day. I had him record the novel on book. I'd sit here and I had my 5D, and I just recorded him reading the book. And then I had him read the whole script, and I just had that always playing in the first part of getting ready, when I was filming it and getting into the script and figuring out what am I actually preparing for. And that's where the voice came from, is those two guys and just being around them. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I filmed it, is because I'd watch it and I'd be like, then I'd listen to him speak, I'm like, nah, it's not there. It's got to be crazier. And then I knew I had it when it sounded like those guys, because they're from that era. They're the real deal.
Did it take a long time to shake off that character?
Yeah, I think, it's a funny thing. I was just the other day and somebody said something about Lester, and I just did the accent real quick, and I haven't done it in. It's weird, it's like I'm directing a movie now, and I have to manage a lot of things. I have to think about budget, I have to think about personnel, I have to think about camera shots, I have to think about everything, When I'm acting, it's this. It's a very one-focused situation. So it's kind of like that's part of your life. You remember, Lester will always be there with me, because I dated him for a year, like solely. That's it. And so I just laid in bed for a while afterwards. I was just physically spent, because after all that work, when they say wrap, you're like, you look around as an actor and you're like, wait, oh wait, it's done, until they say we need to do some ADR, and you're like, really? Really? Why? Then you start talking like him again for a week. You're like.
So Scott, how does working with the same friends and same team like James Franco again and again allow you room to stretch creatively than you would otherwise working with a new set of faces?
It's a good question. It's the same as a theater, right? Everybody sitting at this table, if you're with your friends, you can be yourself. So there's a sense of, I'm not James, I knew I wasn't gonna get like. How did I say it? You can really play. There's so much trust there that it's like you can be very experimental. You can take risks and not worry about getting fired. You can take, because in the movie making industry, it's a business, right? So if you go off script a lot, that's why I'll tell you a great story is Leo and Scorsese when they were doing Wolf of Wall Street. They just ripped a lot. Why? Because how many movies have they done together now? And Scorsese's like, I'm never going to make another movie like this. Here he is doing it again, and they're going crazy in Wolf of Wall Street. That's what happens when you have these collaborators. James comes up to me and says, we're going to shoot your friends at lunch. If I didn't trust that director, and I know I've given everything to a shoot, and I'm going to risk, I may not do it. You really have to trust your team you're working with, whether it's your family or your friends or your inner circle or the people you talk to. And if you're making a movie, it's a very intimate thing. You're with them. They're putting a lot of time into it. The guys working the camera. Cormac wrote the novel 40 years before we debuted the movie. That means that Cormac sat behind a camera. I saw you looking at your camera. Sat behind his typewriter, right? Back then, typewriter, and wrote this freaking novel.